One thing you'll notice is Chloe just doesn't hop on and hope for the best. That can get pretty scary for both horse and rider. She starts with what's called an uncommitted mounting. Fancy horse trainer term for I'm getting on, but not all the way. Ringo gets to feel the weight on his back, and he gets to see her from both eyes. And most importantly, he gets a chance to decide that this isn't actually a mountain lion trying to eat him. At the end of the day, we're asking a prey animal to accept something climbing on top of them. That's a pretty ridiculous request if you think about it. So we're going to try to make this as boring and predictable as possible. You'll also notice Chloe isn't trying to glue his feet to the ground. If he wants to walk a few steps and think about life choices, that's okay. Horses process things with their feet. If I take away forward, if I take away backward, and even sideways, eventually the only option left is up. And I've never met a horse yet that makes a better decision after launching skyward. Once Ringo decides Chloe climbing all over him isn't a big deal, she starts preparing him for the next step. Because riding isn't just sitting on top of a horse. Your legs will bump them, your boots touch them, your knees move, your weight shifts, and every one of those things can be a surprising moment for a horse that has never carried a rider before. So before she commits to sitting up there, she makes sure he's comfortable with all of it. Now, if you've been training horses as long as Chloe's dad and I have, there's usually a few clues that'll tell you whether the horse has carried a rider before. Now, if all your horse knowledge comes from old westerns, Spirit of the Wild Cimarron, or whatever horse video just got a million views on TikTok, you might be surprised to learn that most horses don't immediately turn into a rodeo bronc the moment someone gets on. Sure, they can buck. A horse that has had a bad experience, a horse that's been rushed through the process, or a horse with physical or mental challenges can definitely decide bucking as an answer. But a good trainer isn't trying to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. They're watching every little change in the horse, every sign of whether they're ready to learn or getting overwhelmed. The next step happens only when the horse is ready for it. Chloe's been around horses her entire life, but learning to read a horse takes time and experience. Even now, she still has Dad and I nearby to help catch things she might have missed. In 14 years, we've only had a handful of horses that have chose to buck on that first ride, and every one of them had a reason. Whether it was EPM, past trauma, previous training, or some other underlying issue, the horse was telling us something, and our job was to listen. That's one reason we're pretty confident with Ringo. So far, everything he does points to a horse that's trying to understand and not a horse looking for a fight. I would bet that someone has walked him through the steps of first mounting before, but nothing more. Reining is definitely new, and leg pressure is something he's never felt. Chloe is many things, and brave is usually one of them, but she's smart enough to know that she doesn't quite have the skill to handle his first ride. And Dad gets tagged in. Honestly, I think she's figured out that if Dad gets launched, she still gets to ride tomorrow. And that's a pretty solid system. I've definitely used that same thought process a couple times when I'm training. The first thing we've learned is that Ringo is sticky. Not dangerous, not explosive, just sticky. If given the choice, he'd rather stand near the friends at the fence and discuss life than go exercise. Every horse has something. This is his thing. So when he starts to drift toward the herd, the answer isn't to get mad. The answer is to make that choice a little less appealing. Want to go back to your friends? Great. Move your feet. A lot. Want to go where the rider's asking? Perfect. Life gets easy. Horses are pretty practical creatures. They usually figure out that easy is a good deal. Some horses, they get convinced a little sooner than others. Others that like to travel, like Ringo here, it may take a little bit longer and a few more repetitions to get the point across. While Dad is riding, Chloe is watching Ringo intently. At this point, she's really paying attention to how the horse is responding. What happens when he doesn't get his way? How does he react when Dad's leg moves somewhere he'd rather not go? What happens when the rope starts swinging, adding pressure to encourage forward movement? Well, Ringo gets a bit frustrated. But what does that frustration look like? She's seen some horses throw full-blown temper tantrums, and others simply just pin their ears back and make a grumpy face, complaining about the situation. Remember earlier when I said if a horse can't go forward, backward, or sideways, eventually they'll think about going up. Well, Ringo's giving us a little glimpse of that thought process. In his mind, he can't go where he wants to go. He wants his friends. Backing up isn't getting him anywhere. Moving sideways toward them isn't making the pressure disappear. So, for a brief few moments, he's considering the other option, but that takes a lot of effort, and Ringo just isn't nearly committed enough for that idea to work. The moment he realized that some version of forward is still available, even if it's not the direction or speed that he had in mind, he chooses that instead. That's something Chloe really likes to see. He's not looking for a fight, he's looking for an answer. Even when he gets frustrated, he keeps trying to solve the puzzle rather than to create a bigger problem. And that's a pretty valuable trait for a horse. Aside from not understanding what reining is or how to move off the legs, you can tell Ringo is pretty new to all of this because the way he keeps lifting his back. Carrying a rider on his back is very strange and a weird feeling. Muscles are working that have never worked before, and he's not only balancing for himself, but he's balancing for the rider over top of him, too. It's for this reason that we'd love for him to just go forward rather than circling back consistently to his friends. If they're traveling forward, it's much easier for them to figure out how to balance the rider on their back. A few more learning circles, and Chloe's ready to give it a try herself. He's figured out a little bit of how to move forward, and he's more manageable around his friends. While he's definitely been unsure about directional cues with that halter and rider for the first time, whoa came pretty natural. He even got a little extra credit by figuring out how to do the backup. Once Chloe sees that he's staying thoughtful and not trying to plot anybody's demise, she climbs back on board. The same rules, the same expectations. Make the right thing easy and the wrong thing hard. And honestly, Ringo is taken to it pretty quickly. She approaches it in the same way that her dad did. Not rushing him, not trying to skip ahead, just simply asking questions and making sure he understands the answer. First, forward. Just go at a walk nice and relaxed. Then we'll add a little bit of steering. Then she'll work toward the trot. Most horses learn a lot better at the trot than they do at any other gait. Walking is usually a relaxed and resting gait, and loping things can get scary pretty quickly for both horse and rider. So trotting is the answer to learning. Today's goal, as will be the same goal for the next 3 rides, is to build confidence and understanding. Ringo's pretty predictable. He moves along at the same pace most horses do that don't have a lot of baggage. He wants to do the right thing. Sometimes he's a little sticky with his feet, and definitely sometimes he'd rather be hanging with his buddies. But once he understands the assignment, he tries to put in an honest effort. Chloe spends some of the time working on turns, making sure he understands how to follow the feel of the halter and move his feet where they're being directed. Horses don't have to be perfect on day one, but they do need to be trying, and Ringo definitely tries. By this point, she'd really like to lope him herself. Unfortunately, Ringo is still carrying himself a little rounded in the back and occasionally forgets that forward is supposed to be easy. Keeping a horse moving in a constant trot while balancing bareback starts becoming a workout in a hurry. Eventually, her legs are beginning to feel a lot more like jello than sturdy trees and are filing formal complaints with the management. And of course, this is Chloe, so management isn't responding. Starting horses without a saddle has plenty of advantages for the horse, but it does require the rider to become part saddle, part leg, and part fitness program. For the horse, it's much easier to process mentally. He doesn't have to think about this dead cow being strapped to his back and restricting his movement, while also trying to figure out how to balance and go forward away from his friends and respond to leg pressure and cues from the halter. If we can make their job easier on day one, that's certainly what we're going to do. This also benefits the horse in allowing them to feel the shifting weight of the rider going back and forth with their movement. A lot of horses spend their entire riding career carrying a saddle that keeps everything nice and centered. The rider can move around quite a bit before the horse really feels it. Then one day someone hops on bareback in the pasture, or a saddle slips into an awkward position, and suddenly the horse isn't quite sure what to think. I've seen horses that have packed riders around for years completely lose it going off bucking just because they were never taught that shifting weight was something that was normal. Bareback removes that mystery. The horse learns right from the beginning that people wiggle. They lose their balance. They lean too far one direction. They shift around trying to stay centered. And none of those things are reason to panic. It gives the rider a workout, but it also gives us a valuable information. You can feel when the horse is tight through their back. You can feel when they're bracing. You can feel the exact moment they relax and begin to carry themselves correctly. There's another practical benefit, too. Young horses are constantly changing shape. Some are still growing, some are still filling out, some have shoulders that seem to be determined to change every few months. We've had plenty of horses that require multiple saddle setups before finding the one that truly fit. The last thing I want to do on a first ride is cause the horse some kind of pain through a poorly fitting saddle, while also learning to carry a rider. First ride should never involve pain. The only discomfort should come from making the wrong decision and discovering that the rider is asking for something different. Everything else should be as fair and comfortable as we can make it. That way, the horse can stay focused on learning instead of worrying about what is hurting. So, after a solid session of walking, trotting, turning, stopping, and even a little bit of backing, Chloe's energy is winding down and she's looking for a positive place to stop him. Basically, she's made the executive decision that she'd rather walk tomorrow than push him into a lope today. Chloe's also been around horses long enough to know that the devil comes out in the lope. So she's thinking she'd much prefer to tackle that demon when she gets the saddle settled on his back.